Hello, everybody. I wanted to briefly do a quick review on Van Perlo's amazing Endgame Tactics, which I just finished this morning. I enjoyed it a lot. I was engaging in some life avoidance while doing it. It was that enjoyable. Also, other things. I was supposed to be studying my own games. I was neglecting that a little bit. And the first thing I want to try to sell you on is an idea I had while studying this book, which is that endgame play can be divided into three different areas. You've got what we could call algorithms, and I think Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual is like a classic example of that. How to do certain things, how to mate with certain configurations, right? And I think when most people think about endgame skill, they think of algorithms. But that's definitely just, I think, 1/3 of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about algorithms in a second. The next part of endgame play we could call strategy, maneuvering. And this book, which I also really like, Chershevsky's Endgame Strategy, is a great example of that. And then finally, we have endgame tactics, which I'm going to talk about a little bit today. It's helpful to me to break it down this way because it helps map out what I think I need as a player, and then also as a coach, what I need to give my students. And I think as a kid, I remember just thinking that endgames were about learning algorithms. Maybe also a way to see it is to say, well, like if we think about the top players in the world right now, definitely Magnus Carlsen is the best when it comes to endgame algorithms ever. I mean, he knows a lot of positions. Just to give you an example, in the rook and bishop versus rook ending, which is covered in Dvoretsky's manual, only a couple positions really are covered in the manual. And I feel like I know those myself and maybe a couple others. But there's a lot more. Sometimes a position, say, with a pawn. The opponent has a rook and a pawn, for example. And Magnus has a deep catalog of those positions. So that's what we mean by a skill set of algorithms and how many you can know and remember. For example, there's a lot of algorithms I've learned that I don't have on instant recall. You know, just as you get older, too, it's harder to keep them all in your head. Then with endgame strategy, this is really where, when older GMs talk about beating down the youth in endgames, they're really talking about this. A lot of times kids don't just have a sense of what to do in the ending. They play it too fast. For example, they don't realize what the questions at stake are, and they fumble a lot more than they would in other parts of the game. But endgame tactics is a totally different area, and we should just say, obviously, Magnus is also the best when it comes to strategy in the endgame. Fantastic, intuitive understanding of where the pieces go. But with endgame tactics, what I've really come to admire is that, although, of course, Magnus is amazing with endgame tactics, Fabiano Caruana is the master. The master at endgame tactics, both in creating the mess and then delivering on just incredible endgame tactics. And it's a whole different branch of endgame play. And the obvious thing we can say, of course, is that they're all interrelated. Even in endgame strategy, it's not like we're just going through without some tactical variations. They blend all together, but they are different kinds of skills. Okay, so first of all, I want to say that I was a little confused with Endgame Tactics, the book, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. I was confused because as a book, it's not presented as a series of problems, and that's what I expected. So, you know, when you don't get what you expected, you can be a little bit miffed at the situation. And, for example, a book I very much like is this one, Encyclopedia of Chess Endings, by Klinishenko, and this is all problems, you know, white to move and win, white to move and draw, etc. And I love this book. I got a lot out of it. Also arranged in the same way of endgame tactics, you know, pawn endgames, and then going on to the different material configurations. And that book has a lot more of what we could call the theoretical positions. You could think of as algorithms if you like, but like the standard bedrock positions along with endgame studies and also practical play. This book, though, is different in that it is not necessarily for problems. It's more like, for me, going over a bunch of master level games where mistakes are committed. And one of the odd things about, say, a book like this is we're not looking too much at mistakes being made. And I realized when going through the book, it's like, right. This confirms what my deep-seated opinion was, that the end game is really where the most mistakes are being made, due to both fatigue of the players, less time on the clock, and it's just a place where really all the fireworks can happen. And this book showcases so many beautiful mini dramas that have gone down in chess history amongst the world's best, that just don't happen at the same frequency at other phases of the game. So it was kind of bringing in a human element to the endgame that I very much appreciated. Now, I gotta say, I know some people will be reading this book on Chessable, and I think what they've done in Chessable is they've turned it all into problems. Because that's what Chessable does. They want everything to be a problem, and then you memorize your answer and you check it, which is kind of cool, but it's also missing the point. So, for example, when back in the day, we used to go over classic games, classic game collections, and the moves were all there, and it's not like you were seeing what should I do in a certain position, but you would definitely have questions, and you would pursue those questions as you had them, and maybe make little notes in pencil. And that's what I ended up doing with this book. I had loads of questions. There are very few positions that are presented as problems, and I think even New in Chess, which put this out, kind of wanted that element in there and put that a little bit, forced it on the book. The book has also had several editions after the guy died in 2010. So what I'm trying to say is, it's fine if you do it the Chessable way, but I really did enjoy it just looking at it the human way, the way we would look at an old games collection, writing notes in pencil. And I even had, on Endgame Sensei, I had my two IMs playing some of the positions out. It was kind of hilarious, and you can watch that on our YouTube channel. One thing I want to mention in conclusion here is a thing that I really like about the book is that this guy, he was a correspondence player, and we don't give those people respect anymore. And they had more respect back in the day, because back in the day you couldn't use a computer, and now I think we just all assume that they're using computers. In any case, this guy was a correspondence player, and for decades he was collecting these positions that were, I assume he was getting them from like Russian magazines and all kinds of other magazines, and collating them into this amazing book. And the reason I think that gives it a special value is, if you go through a bunch of games, GM games, you'll find loads of endgame mistakes that the computer can show you. But since this guy is really showing, for the most part, positions that a human came to the analysis, whether it was the player itself, something found in the postmortem, something found by an annotator, that a human found, a beauty in the position that a human found. It's far more accessible and interesting to me, because as a player and also as a coach, I'm interested in what is possible for the human mind to find in any given position. And that's the real joy that this guy, in collecting this incredible mass of material, gave us. One thing that it's not, and I don't think it should be meant to be, is if you study this book, you should realize that it completely passes over what you could consider the bedrock positions. And perhaps it assumes that you know them. Positions that you would get in, say, this book or the Endgame Manual by Dvoretsky. And I think even if you don't know them, though, this is still a great place to start. And one thing I'll just try to sell you on as a final note is I think some players could ask me, well, Kraai, is this above my level or something like that? When do I need to do Endgame Tactics? When do I need to do these other books? And the fact is, I think the earlier you can embrace the ending as something beautiful and joyful and not something hideous, not something hideous, I think the more your chess is going to grow, because the endgame play is not just about learning some algorithm. If that's what it is to you, then of course it's going to sound boring. But it's about understanding the harmony and interrelationships of a small number of pieces. And when you understand that kind of interrelationship, it'll be much easier to conceptualize it when you have more pieces on the board at the beginning and the middle game of the game. All right, there it is. I very much enjoyed it. I'll have links to all these books below. Van Perlo's Endgame Tactics. Bye-bye.